Greetings from the Urban Elements Applique Elements Studio. Today what we're going to be working on is another one of the blocks from the Winter Wonderland Applique tree skirt. I have the block that we're going to be working on illustrated here on our original sample, and this is a great one because we have Santa Claus making a special appearance on there. I have my kit all ready. All I have to do is grab one of the wedges from the fabric that I pre-cut at the beginning of the series and get my applique pieces ready, and we can go ahead and get started. I do have the applique tree skirt here on the table. We also have the coordinating wall quilt hanging here in the background. That also was a block of the month program. We still have these available, and you can see it comes packaged in a really nice box like this with all of the laser cut and pre-fused applique inside it. So let's get the table cleaned off and we can get started on this month's block. As I said earlier, we have a really fun block to work on this month because we have the appearance of Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, Father Christmas. Oh, there's too many names. Noel, something, Noel. Anyway, the first thing I always do is iron my paper pattern. I just like to get the creases out of the pattern because the pattern is a placement guide, and if we have huge creases in it, it might shift where we actually place a component, which would make the design not overlap as properly as it should. So it just takes a second. I use a dry iron, and I just get the creases out of it. Also, some of the pieces are so large they won't fit inside the packaging, so they lightly fold those over, and I always like to go ahead and give those a little iron as well. Now I still have the paper backing on my fusible, and so I can iron this and let it cool, and it will peel off just as it should. Just wouldn't want to do this ironing to get a crease out after you get the fabric or the paper backing off, because it will fuse to whatever it's laying on top of. And so I always like to do this just to start, and that gives the pieces a chance to cool down before I need them. So I have all my pieces here off to the side. Sometimes when I have a lot of pieces like this, I will go ahead and lay them out so they're generally in the place that they're going to go on the actual applique, and that way I can A, make sure that I have all of my pieces in place, but B, as I'm assembling things, they go together a little bit quicker. Now this is something that you could do with the kids if you wanted to get them to help with the project. You could have them put these pieces together like a little puzzle, and using the color cover guide, they could go ahead and place these pieces as they would be on the pattern, or they could use the placement guide itself as actual puzzle and place these in place just to make sure all the pieces are there, but also to engage them and bring them into the process. So they remember later that that tree skirt is something that they helped build. They have an actual memory of it. It's not just an item that's sitting in the house. So I'm going to go ahead and get my light box out with my pattern on it, and then we'll start placing some of these pieces together on the side so we can see everything's together, but also I might do some compound pieces where it's layer after layer after layer of piece, just so we can see where they go off of the background. Makes it a little bit easier to see. Well, here we have it.
Sorry, I'm having trouble understanding right now. Please try a little later.
Alexa, pause. As you can see, I have a lot of the pieces laid out in the general place that they will go, and I'm going to put some of these compound pieces together, even though all of the edges will be not connected to something. Like I'm going to put this house on this house background. I'm going to peel the paper off of this one, but not this one. But I'll still be able to handle these whole piece as a unit. So the paper is still on the back part of this house. I'm going to start with the door, and I'm going to put my door handle in place. And the door handle again is that Steam-A-Seam 2 on the Ultra Suede, which is a little bit thicker. And I always like to give that a little bit of pressure just to make sure it stays in place. So then I can go ahead and put this piece down. My paper backing still on there. I'm going to peel the paper backing off of the door. And I can put my door in place on this build out where the entryway of the door is. And I can also put this round window in place. Now I can go ahead and move the house itself into position, and I can go ahead and put these two windows on the house, but the house still has its paper backing on it, so it's not sticking to anything. I can peel the paper backing off of the windows and get those into position. And by doing this, it just helps me get these pieces placed correctly so I can still see through the layers. Once we get too many layers in place, then it's really hard to start seeing through all the different layers to the placement guide, even if you have a really bright light box. Now you could just do this by a visual placement, getting a close reference to where something goes. I just like to do this just to make sure I get it exactly right, since I am showing you how to do it. Now all of these pieces are fused in the warehouse setting, in a factory setting. They fuse large pieces of the fabric, and then they get it through a machine that does laser cutting. And the laser cutting is all digitally done, and it gives you really crisp edges. Because it's basically burning that edge with that laser light, I think it gives you a really crisp finish on the edges. It's a little bit different than cutting with like a Cameo Silhouette or a Brothers Cannon cut, or with a pair of household scissors. These are really sharp, crisp lines, which is why the laser cut applique is kind of such a nice thing to do. Now these next few pieces over here, I'm going to go ahead and leave those off because there's nothing else underneath them, and I'll be able to see those pretty well. But I do think I'm going to try and get some of Santa Claus done, just because there's so many different layers on Santa. So I'm going to go ahead and put his mitten here. And this is one where we really have to just look pretty closely at the placement on each of these items. I am peeling the paper off of the back of these. I'm not putting too much pressure down on them when I'm sticking them to the paper. I'm just giving it a little bit of a light press there. And what I really will press on is these pieces of that overlap. I really want to get those together pretty good. So I'm pressing really good where it goes together. I'm going to put this shirt on next. Now some of this, just like you would be, I'm guessing at the placement. Now anything that has a dotted line means that that goes back behind something else. But exactly where it goes, we just have to play a little bit and see if we've got it right. And we can also peek at our color placement guide, and I can see that I've placed the blue in the wrong place. That's where his white fur goes. So I will try again as soon as I figure out where I placed my fur lining. Then we have the blue one, which has a little bit of a gap there. And let's see, I can do my little mitten overlap, but I might wait to do that until I get it onto the background, since I have to move both of those pieces. So let's see, what will I do next? I can do the face. Now, I have often attributed the fact that I don't have a problem peeling the paper liners off due to my climate a little bit. I don't know if that's actually the case or not. If you do have a problem with peeling the paper off the back, you can always use a seam ripper, the tip of some scissors, or a pen, and just score the fabric. I use a Clover flathead pen, and when you fold it over where you've scored it, that usually gives you a little piece. I didn't score it deep enough. That you could fold over and lift up the edge. That's also kind of a good idea for when you're doing round pieces or anything, so you're not handling the edge. And I can't see at all where that goes, so that's a little bit flexible at the moment. I think I might wait until I get the rest of these pieces on the background before I place too much more on here. I'm pretty sure that that beard is not where it needs to go. So after this piece, well, I can do the mustache because I can see that. I'm going to put the beard off to the side. And I can do the eyes, but I want to see what color. The eyes are black, and then he has a yellow nose. See, all of these pieces I can see through the pattern, but once I get these onto the background, I might not be able to see through that. And the eyes are always ultra suede. Those are a little bit harder to keep in place just because they're a little bit thicker. So I have just about everything in place that I can do. I could put his little belt buckle in place. But this is going to be a little bit of a guess. So I can go ahead and peel these two pieces up and get them onto my background. You can see that this is going to come up all as one unit. I just want to keep it safe so that I don't crease anything, but I can peel it all up as one. And if I have to do a little bit of adjusting when I get to the pattern, I can still do that. Let's see if I can do it from the bottom up easier. It just takes a little bit of patience, which I'm not known for. This came up as two separate pieces, but I can live with that. And now I can set these pieces off to the side, and I can get my background fabric laid on here, and then I have a lot of these components all ready to go. Now I have my background fabric in place. I can go ahead and place some of these components down. And I've peeled this piece off, but I'm going to have to find the paper and put it back because it overlaps the seam. So I'm going to have to put that aside until we get all of the wedges together. So that should be an interesting little experiment. The next thing I can put down is this large component here, and all of these have the paper backing off, but the house did not. So I'm going to go ahead and peel that paper backing off now. See if we can get Santa Claus down in a close approximation of his original place. What I'm most concerned about is the hand placement here, because I've already placed his hand on there. Now I can put on his beautiful furry cuff. And I can work on his other mittens over here. This is how he keeps his hands warm as he's making all of his deliveries, with those big thick mittens. Yet they still let him handle the reins of the sleigh. So we have all of Santa Claus in place except for his hat. I'm going to put the paper back on that and save it. But now I'm going to move up a little bit, and you can see a lot of the flourishes are going to go off of this block as well. So I'm not going to be putting those on. And you can see I have forgotten to put a piece in place here. So I'm going to lift up these and get that under there. So I'm going to fidget a little bit with this right here because I'm not happy with the way that little edge is sticking out. I know I can reposition these pieces and get that correct. But I'm going to go ahead and work on the peak of the roof while I have these pieces ready. This month it seems like we have several pieces that are going to overlap the blocks here. So I may just do this whole flourish section and the hat all when I get the pieces in place, the seams put together for the wedges. So it seems like a lot of pieces, but I want to make sure that they don't cause a problem as I am sewing this edge together. So I'm going to go ahead and fuss with this a little bit, and then we'll get to the phase where we're going to fuse everything down. I think also I could get his beard on at this point, but I'm going to look carefully at how that goes before I do that. That is his beard. Okay. I can see just the very edge And here's my little Packed by Vicky. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get this fixed here a little bit, and then we'll get to the phase where I'm going to fuse this together. I did a little bit better job here of getting these pieces in place so it actually looks like that fur wraps around the bottom of his shirt or his jacket, and that this band also matches the edges. So I'm happier with that. That's what's great about the Steam-A-Seam 2. It allows you to reposition. You can also see that these pieces are in place even though they're not fused. All of these could still be lifted up and repositioned if they needed to be. I have eliminated everything off to the side that's going to overlap, and I'll put those on after I join the seams together. And I did get my paper back aligned on my Santa hat, so that'll be safe in the meantime. What I'm going to do is fuse the pieces in place now, and I like to use just a little spray bottle with water in it to activate the Steam-A-Seam 2. It does require some kind of a steam component, and I know some of you will have water in your iron and will use the steam function. I don't like to put water in my iron because I don't like my iron to leak. They just seem to last longer if you don't load water. So I'm going to put on top an applique pressing sheet here, and the applique pressing sheet is going to protect my iron. It's going to protect the fusible edges. It's going to protect the background fabric from getting scorched if we overdo a particular area. So it also traps that steam in. So I'm just going to start in one section, and generally you count to 10 or 12 or 15, or depending on the heat of your iron. I do have to include a little bit of time for the heat to transfer through this Teflon pressing sheet. I got this particular Teflon pressing sheet from Laura Heine's website. She does the beautiful collages and also uses Steam-A-Seam 2. So she has this really large one, which I really like for doing these large appliques. But as I said, you do have to let that heat transfer down through the applique components. The reason we did some of these components off of the background was because they were compound pieces, one layer after another. And we have to remember that when we're fusing, and allow time for the heat and the moisture to activate through all those layers. On the same topic, I like to iron both from the front, and then I'll remist it again from the back and iron it also from the back, just to make sure that the heat has had time to penetrate all those layers and fuse all of that Steam-A-Seam 2 by activating it with the heat and the steam. You'll know if you haven't fused good enough if you're ever top stitching or quilting through a fusible applique project and you're getting an excessive amount of gumming up on the needle. You'll know that that's an indication that you haven't fused properly. If you have activated all of that fusible with steam and heat, it will bond to the fabric and there won't be a lot of excess fusible material to come loose on the needle. So I'm going to go ahead and take my time fusing this whole piece from the top down, and then I'll flip it over and do the same thing from the back. I am just finishing up the ironing on the back of the block. I want to make sure that I've gotten this fused properly from both sides, just to make sure that all those layers are completely fused and permanent in my project. And now I can go ahead and flip that over. We have a few components that are going to overlap into the seam, like his hat, and a couple of the flourishes here at the top also go into the next wedge. So we'll wait until I get that component pieced together, and then we'll join those extra pieces. So I want to thank you for stopping by the studio today and working with me as I get this tree skirt put together for this holiday season. I'm excited for the process of getting it onto the quilt frame and getting it quilted as well. And then the binding. Oh, the binding. There's going to be a lot of binding going around that circle, and then up the two parts where it slits open, and then around the circle. We'll get to that part, and I'm not sure I'm looking forward to it or not, but it is part of the process. So until then, we'll see you next time, and thanks for stopping by.